Okay. The flow seemed to stop. So, hi everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Haley. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm going to be the session monitor for this session. I'm mainly here to help in any way that I can. So if at any point you encounter just like a moment to yourself that seems harmful or hurtful in any way, feel free to message me. If you have any concerns throughout the session, again, feel free to message me. I'm going to be putting into the chat our community agreements, as well as the wellness room that you can go into if you just need a moment to breathe, ground yourself, or talk through any feelings that may arise. And I will put both of those in the chat momentarily. And so without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to the Storytelling for Change team.
Hi, welcome. Thank you all for being here. This panel is Storytelling for Change, and the goal is to show how we use stories in our work as a very real tool to affect change, not only in ourselves, our homes, our communities, but also in government. Everyone on the panel today works at Initiate Justice, which is a policy change nonprofit based in California, committed to ending mass incarceration in our state. Our organization is entirely system impacted led, and I'm really glad you'll get to meet some of those leaders today. I'll start with introducing myself, and then I'm going to popcorn over. I'll just be facilitating. My name is Ra. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am formerly incarcerated. I'm the communications manager for Initiate Justice, which means I get to story tell our work to the world. I'm also the co-host of our new podcast, Abolition is for Everybody. And I'll go ahead and popcorn to Lee, who's giving you an example of our logo here.
Thanks, Ra. My name is Lee, he, him, his. I'm also formerly incarcerated, and with IJ, I'm the inside organizing manager. And what that does and how that kind of connects to storytelling is we have over 40,000 members that are currently incarcerated in California. And so about 170 of them have raised their hand and they wanted to become more involved and become organizers on their facilities. And so they're the leaders within their facilities to be able to advocate for laws, bill changes, and to fight for policies for their peers. And so I'm kind of the person that is in the background with them and helping and assisting and supporting them in their journey. And so that's it. I'm very happy to be here and talk a little bit more about how those narratives and those stories affect policy and affect how we do our job. So I will popcorn it over to Daisy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daisy Chavez. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I serve as Initiate Justice's statewide advocacy manager. And in my role, I get to work with our members who are both impacted and allies on the outside to help support the campaigns that we are working on in the policy sphere. So that means providing the tools that they need to successfully advocate and spread the word about the campaigns that we are working on. And that includes the work that we do in the state legislature. So really, really excited to be here to talk about how storytelling comes into play with the work that we do at Initiate Justice.
Thank you, Daisy, Lee, and Ra. My name is Antoinette Ratcliffe. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the outside organizing manager with Initiate Justice. I too am system impacted, supporting 3 loved ones currently incarcerated throughout California. As the outside organizing manager, what that means is that I get to work with and help in developing and expanding our outside membership base and our outside organizers. So when we say inside or outside, what we are referring to is our inside-outside organizing strategy, meaning we prioritize people currently inside managed by Lee and some of our other inside organizing and membership teams. And then we also prioritize formerly incarcerated people and their loved ones on the outside who are not incarcerated and are in our communities here with us. And so as the outside organizing manager, I assist in ensuring those individuals are developed, they have the tools and resources that they need to be effective advocates, and they are engaged in this work through Initiate Justice and in the overall movement to end mass incarceration and abolish prisons. And I also manage our 12-week advocacy and leadership training program, which is called the Institute of Impacted Leaders. And this is a very diligent program through which we build leaders who are system impacted, teach them about the policy process in California and how they can effectively advocate for their freedom and the freedom of their loved ones and their communities. Thank you.
Y'all. And yes, like to Daisy's point in the chat, all 4 of us are graduates of that program. And a big aspect of that program is kind of getting everybody on the same page when it comes to how the legal system works and what we can do to affect change. Because we're going to be talking about the importance of like true and vulnerable stories, I do want us to talk a little bit about beyond our job titles, you know, why are we in this and why do we believe in abolition or prison work or abolishing prisons. So as I mentioned, I'm formerly incarcerated, and I came to this work after seeing all the cogs of the inside of that system. And, you know, something that you'll hear often in this work is that the system is not broken, it works this way on purpose. And seeing that firsthand really kind of shifted my whole world. It really made me look at everything differently and realize that to one way or another, everyone in this country is impacted by this mass incarceration system. And I will go ahead and popcorn to Daisy so you can tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I actually came into this sphere of my life with a loved one who spent about 6 years in prison, 6 years incarcerated. 3 of those years were in state prison. 3 of them were in county jail awaiting trial. And prior to my loved one being incarcerated, I had actually been on the other side of the spectrum where I actually wanted to be a prosecutor. I had this belief and this notion that there were bad people in the world that needed to be put away. And when my loved one was incarcerated, it completely shifted my perspective as far as how things operate in the world. And it really, that experience in itself really gave me a critical lens as far as like how things are actually are in this sphere, and seeing how folks of color are really the ones that are primarily impacted the most by incarceration, meeting the families that I spoke with in the visiting rooms, and just drawing those connections, and just that entire experience made me realize that there are several issues that are wrong with just the carceral system as a whole. And even in the reentry process, when my loved one was released from prison, and seeing the lack of resources that don't exist in our communities, that those resources that we need to rely on to be able to support a successful reentry are not there for everybody. And the community that I come from, largely Latinx communities that don't have wealth or income that can sustain healthy reentry. And so just seeing that particular aspect of it really shifted my view of things, and said, like, this doesn't work. Like, there's a reason why folks come in and out, and it's because those resources are not in place for everybody. And so I'm in this line of work, my goal is to really make sure that we can eliminate the system that's in place and actually replace that with something that's more based in community-based resources.
And Antoinette, did you want to maybe talk a little bit about what brought you to this?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Ra. So, what brought me to this work is just as everyone else has spoken, lived experiences, being directly impacted by it. So, I was raised with four brothers in a two-parent household, and at one point in time, one of my cousins also came to live with us and was being raised under that same household. Well, in a matter of a couple of years, between 1999 and 2007, all three, my oldest cousin and my two older brothers, were incarcerated as youth. In this same time period, both of my best friends in middle school and throughout middle school and high school were in and out of juvenile hall. So I spent a tremendous amount of time in middle school and high school writing letters. That was my relationship with the people who were closest to me. And my only defense was to stay out of jail. My only defense was to be a resource for them as much as I possibly can. And so that's what I did. I proceeded with going to college and trying to get getting an education and trying to find ways to continuously be a resource for those who are closest to me and who I endeared the most. And as I began to realize that I was not enough, that me and my family alone were not enough to support these individuals, to help my brothers, to help my cousin, it caused me to seek and look for other solutions and look for help. And that's ultimately what brought me to initiate justice and to this work. And in seeking help, I found answers, I found solutions, I found that there's power actually in our stories as opposed to what we historically had done, which was keep that issue, that problem within our family and just try to digest it and fight through it as best as we could. And so as I began to seek solutions and find help and initiate justice and in advocacy work, what brought me to the point of abolition was realizing that the common question that people were asking me or asking us and was, well, if we're not putting them in prison, then what do we do with them? And they said it like, I would hear it as if it was objects, as if there was something that had to be done with my brother. There was something that had to be done with my cousin, with my loved ones. And realize that the real question we should be asking and where we will truly find solutions is, what do we do for people to prevent this in the first place? And that's ultimately what brought me to this work of abolition. And I still continue to support my three loved ones who are currently incarcerated, and through advocacy, I find power, and through my story, I am liberated.
Lee, I guess you have to follow that. And
I mean, this is why I love this team so much. I mean, they're so diverse and we come from so many different walks of lives. And I feel like I didn't get to abolition. Abolition got to me. And it's always been a part of like my life and our community's lives. And it just took me a while in order to get to it. And growing up, I never felt like I mattered. I didn't feel like I had worth or value. And I was like traumatized and abused quite often. And I just didn't feel like I belonged. And it wasn't until years later, after my incarceration, that I started to really delve into not only my self-efficacy, but my self-esteem and trying to find ways to improve that. And so when I said that abolition, like how I kind of like grew into it, it was through that means of like, there was always resources here and there that supports abolition. It was just this big monster of the punitive justice system that kind of held it back and is silencing it. And so as I continued to delve into like who I was, my morals, my principles, how I wanted to show up in this world, I really started to understand that, the foundation is, kindness, being caring for one another and love, which is abolition. It is taking the power away from an oppressive system and giving it back to those that care for you and that love you and that want you to be successful and want you to show up in your family and your community and for those people that are around you. And so for me personally, it's just been like a natural evolution and growth. And as I transitioned out here back into society after 25 years, the resources were there. They were hard to find. And they were, again, silenced by the system that is out here, that is not necessarily connecting folks to those resources like Daisy was talking about with her loved one. And so I love this work and I love being able to like talk about it and I love being able to share and I love being able to learn from other folks and their journeys because it's just going to make me stronger, a stronger advocate for everyone else as I continue to, you know, live the remaining of my days out here and in this beautiful world that we have that is sometimes marred and overlooked by the negativity or the media that is highlighting, you know, tragedies over the greatness, I think, that is in every one of us that just needs to have that light, that spotlight to shine on. So how I got into abolition.
Thank you. I know that Initiate Justice does a lot of things, and what we just explained can sound like a lot of moving parts. But to put it in terms of like a family experience, Lee would be the person speaking to people who are actually inside and currently incarcerated. So, like, he would be the one talking to me if I were inside and he were outside, or vice versa. And Antoinette manages the people who are advocating on behalf of people inside. And so part of that, as she mentioned, is the Institute of Impacted Leaders, which is made up in part with formerly incarcerated people like myself and Lee, and partly with people who are supporting currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people, or who were otherwise significantly personally impacted by the system, like Daisy and Antoinette. And then when they learn those skills to be able to tell their story in succinct legislative terminology and in ways that allow them to be able to be truthful to their own story, but still, you know, learn how to explain what happened, because there's a lot of words in incarceration that don't make sense. Even when as from my own experience, even when you're inside, there are things that do not make sense. You sort of start to get it, but you can't necessarily verbalize it until you practice. And the Institute is an organization of practice. And once they've practiced, then they get put into Daisy's hands, and she gathers them close and takes them to talk directly to legislators. And those are done in a series of meetings that help explain how our stories support the bills that they're going to be voting on, and why it's so important that they vote in favor of liberation. So I'm going to turn it back to Antoinette, since it kind of, that storytelling starts on the outside, starts there. If you wanted to talk to us a little bit about the Institute and how it teaches storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ra. And the Institute is one of my favorite aspects of Initiate Justice, of course, biasly, because I am a product of the Institute of Impacted Leaders, and I am a facilitator and manager of the program itself. But so storytelling is essential in the Institute of Impacted Leaders. We cover multiple things. So we talk about community organizing. We talk about how the policy process works. How does a bill become a law in the first place? And where in that process can our voices be heard and be most impactful? And we also talk about how we can be effective individually in using laws and using new legislation and using the policy, using policies to fight for our own freedoms and for the freedom of our loved ones. And so in order to do that, in the very first week of the program, we cover telling your story, because we have found that throughout the entire process, one of sometimes the hardest things to do is also the most important and essential, which is being able to communicate who you are, why you are in this work, and why change is needed, which ultimately derives from our stories and our personal experiences. And so storytelling has become an essential part of the Institute of Impacted Leaders. And something that I want to highlight is in recognizing like the art form of storytelling and recognizing the power of storytelling, in that is healing. And what we have found and what we have noticed and what we have been so appreciative of being able to experience is the healing and transformation that takes place in a room where you gather 20 to 25 individuals who are both formerly incarcerated and who are currently supporting people who are incarcerated, and they begin to unpeel back the layers of what they experience, unpeel back the layers of emotions and the trauma. And so as these individuals begin to share their stories, there's a bridge built between people outside and people inside, and how our experiences are so vital to communicate to the world in order for them to understand what it is that we go through. And so not only is it transformative for the collective healing of the individuals who are in that space, but we've also found that formerly incarcerated people do not often talk about their traumas, their experiences from when they're incarcerated. So we have had moments where individuals, as we go through the week of telling your story, and we have them complete like a story of self worksheet and identify some most important and vital moments in their lives, they are speaking about some of the most traumatic moments in their lives for the first time. And from that comes a lot of pain, but also, again, a lot of healing is created through that. And then also hearing their own stories out loud is oftentimes eye-opening and awakening for individuals to understand what it is, that the harm that they've experienced, because they have a lot of times system impacted people are recognized only for the harm that they have caused, but they are not recognized, or the harm that they have experienced is oftentimes silenced or hidden or just not acknowledged at any moment. And so in these spaces, there's a safety net that they feel because they're amongst individuals from similar experiences, and they begin to talk about experiences and traumas that they may have not talked about before, or may have not felt empowered or comfortable speaking about in other spaces. And so in that, we've learned that so much healing and self-reflection and transformation happens before even learning about the policy process, before even learning about how impactful these stories can be. There's a healing that happens from just simply communicating and sharing and identifying their own stories. And that's self-reflection, that's self-discovery, and it's very, very moving in those spaces. So I definitely wanted to highlight that about the Institute of Impacted Leaders and what storytelling does in the Institute.
Thank you, Antoinette. Yes, that's so important. Making sure that our organizers doing the work are taken care of, that they have those spaces to heal. IJ has several healing circles that are open to anyone across the world, no matter, whether or not you organize with us or not, because we are all in this community together. I think part of my incarceration story is that while I was inside, my husband passed away. And I always tell people, like, it causes harm to those on the outside too. It's it's not a good or healthy or kind or restorative or rehabilitatory place for a person on the inside to be. But it drags your loved ones through a pretty terrible thing too. And that's what I mean by the system impacted nature of the carceral system is much wider than we think. And healing those groups of us together is super important. It also makes us a little bit more cohesive when we get to the stage of talking to our people who can advocate on behalf of us on a larger governmental scale, like our legislative staff members and assembly members and senators. And when we get there with our stories, we do have some systems in place to make sure that those are logical. And I'll let Daisy tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. So one of the things at Initiate Justice that we do is really empower our impacted members to be the ones to drive the campaigns that we're seeking to make policy changes on. And so with these efforts, one of the tactics that we use is participating in legislative meetings. And this means that we organize our members to meet with their elected officials in the state legislature, that includes their assembly members and their senators, to advocate for the bills that we are supporting or co-sponsoring. And so this spring we actually launched a series of legislative visits that we called Spring Legislative Visits 2021. And over 10 weeks, we took over 100 of our members and placed them in groups to meet with several elected officials across the state of California. I think in total, we met with 45 assembly offices. And just to put it into context, in the state of California, there are 80 assembly districts. So we met with over half of the number of assembly offices in the state of California. And we prepared our members in advance, just letting them know, like, this is how these visits typically work, the structure of it. And this is where, if you're comfortable, you can share your story and be vulnerable and really deliver the message that you want these elected officials to hear. Because at the end of the day, these are the individuals who are going to have the power to be able to push policies that we are wanting to become law. And this is what we're hoping will get us one step closer to ending mass incarceration. So over the course of the spring, when we did these visits, several of our impacted members jumped in to participate. Some of them for the first time, some of them seasoned. So it really was a collective effort of people empowering each other in the process. And the newbies, some of them were a little nervous and they preferred to just take a smaller role at the beginning. But by the end of the spring visits, many of them were already very much empowered to be a strong advocate for themselves, for their families, for their loved ones. And so in these visits that we did over the spring, some of the things that I noticed, and I was in several of these meetings to really just be able to facilitate the conversations and guide our members, I noticed that it was where I saw that the importance of storytelling was highlighted in these visits. This is where our impacted members finally had that opportunity to talk and share about their lived experiences with someone who actually had the power to make a change in the policies that are in place and make an impact that could affect their loved ones. So here it was in these settings where folks were empowered to say, look, someone can finally hear me and my story and my loved one's struggle and everything that they've done just to get to where they're at. It really was, I think, an opportunity for our members to educate these lawmakers and their staff about the actual injustices that are in place and why the current system as it exists does not work. So here we had the opportunity to talk about why the things that are in place are not working, what is wrong with it, why the bills that we are seeking to push forward are actually the change that we need to embrace to be able to move in the right direction. And in these visits, I also saw that our members who are impacted finally also had the opportunity to really chip away at some of the misconceptions that elected officials and their staff had about the carceral system. So here we had, so for example, there was a bill that we had been advocating for that's still in the process at this moment, that had to do with credits, which is where folks who are incarcerated can earn time off of their sentence or their parole date. And there was a lot of misconceptions with regards to the way credits are earned or this current system as it exists. And it was our impacted members and their loved ones who really took the lead in breaking away the myths that were in place about how these programs actually work. A lot of our members who had loved ones that were currently incarcerated took these opportunities, even though these meetings were hosted virtually via Zoom, to show off their loved ones who were in graduation regalia or at visits with their family, to really paint a picture for them, like, this is who I'm fighting for. This is why you need to vote for these things. I think in one of these meetings, one of our members asked their elected official, like, put your hand over your heart. Do you feel your heartbeat? Like, every time you make a decision, my loved one, that's their heart that you're listening to. They are incarcerated, and you have the ability to make it possible for them to be able to come home. But it was really time and time again in these visits that we saw, it was the stories that really drove the narrative for the conversation for what we need to do to change. And by the end of each of these visits, the staff and the elected officials always thanked our members for sharing their stories and being vulnerable, but also reminded us to keep telling our stories, because it is our stories that they walk away with at the end of the day. And remember, it's not statistics, it's not numbers. To them, it's the stories that resonated with them the most. And I think that just shows how much power we have in sharing our stories and being vulnerable about that.
Thank you, Daisy. And as someone who's been in one of those meetings, it's amazing to see, assembly members and senators really responding to the stories. That veneer, that shiny smile kind of goes away for a second, and you're talking to an actual human being who is seeing you as an actual human being. And it's a powerful thing. And really what's happening there, beyond the push towards legislation, is a culture change. And we always say at Initiate Justice that we're a policy org, but we can change all the laws. And if the hearts of people aren't on the same page as us, then that's not productive work. And which is part of the reason we started the podcast, and a lot of the reason for how we work with people on the inside, because we want them to come out activated and ready to deal with this world. And so and make some real change in it. And I will let Lee talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Ra. There's so many places that I would love to go with this, but I know we don't have the time. With the shifting of the cultural narrative, specifically with the folks that are incarcerated, there's this process that you go into once you're incarcerated in California, and it's built on division. As soon as you go in, you're separated from whatever area you're from. You're separated from the communities that are neighboring communities. You're separated by race. And so there's really this division that is put up, and it further exacerbates the issues that is wrong with communication and healthy communication. The folks inside, they go through a transition process with higher education and inner education, and kind of bringing these two things together so that they can become what they would classify as rehabilitated. But what it really is just getting to know themselves and getting to know, I think they're coming to arrest me because I'm talking about abolition. What they really get to do is delve into who they are as people, And that narrative is so important. It's not only important for them to build their self-efficacy and build their self-esteem and really come into their own, but it's important for their family members and their loved ones to see it and to know it about them, that this person has made choices that have put them in a position where the system has kind of made them captive of one that is just continuously oppressing and dividing them and trying to separate them from their true inner self and from their family members and their loved ones. And so I promise I won't be on a soapbox too long. And the next part of that is, while you are discovering who you are and how you want to change, you then have to, oftentimes you have to prove it to a system that is there to hold you. And they have a vested interest in holding you. I'm getting a call from CDCR right now. They have a vested interest in holding you inside. And so you then have to become like a Sufi master of what it means to know thyself. And you have to describe the events that you've gone through. You have to be able to describe the feelings, and you have to be able to describe the choices that you made based on those experiences and based on those feelings. And then you have to unwind it all to tell them how, when you're faced with those obstacles again, that you won't repeat the same behaviors that you did before. And as this narrative is developing within yourself, it's also developing within your family members, your loved ones, the system. And then ultimately, we want to be able to share those narratives, share those testimonies with the policymakers, the folks that are actually pulling the strings or deciding where budgets need to go. And I know that they talked a little bit about credits earlier, and I know that there's been like an outrage of people earning time off, which is ironic because the budget is incentivized on being able to produce results. Let me jump back on my soapbox. 40 years ago, the budget for CDCR was $395 million. It is now $15 billion in California. The recidivism rates are exactly the same. Maybe there's a differential be 1 or 2%, and yet they're continuously incentivized to hold people inside. But with folks that are under their guidance, I'll say, they are being admonished because they want to earn time off. Their incentive is actually to change themselves for the better, to understand those narratives of how they became the person that they are and how they want to become the person that they would be proud of, their family members would be proud of, and that they would be a productive and pro-social member of society. And so it's really ironic that they use one for them and then the same thing against the folks that are inside. And so what we try to do with our IJ members that are inside is we try to educate the folks about legislative change, about how they can become stakeholders in their communities, and how to develop that confidence and the agency within themselves to be able to speak up and speak out about things that are important to them. IJ absolutely believes that people that are closest to the issues are absolutely closest to the solutions. And this goes internally, and this goes within the communities that we live in. And so that's where we want to marry the folks that are inside and educate them. So when they do return, that they're able to become the community leaders and organizers that has always been within them to be able to create that positive change in our communities. And which leads to Ra's other point of abolition, of our podcast, of spreading the power that abolition actually will have on our communities in a pro-social, civic engaging way, as opposed to the one that is currently in place that has had many, many years of failure behind their I guess their veil of fear, of putting fear into our communities instead of spreading that love and that hope and that kindness that we actually need in order to get past this this punitive system that is kind of built a hard, cold shell around a lot of people. And so that is kind of one little aspect. I knew I wanted to go many different directions with this, but that's one little aspect. And just one other thing, Rob, when I first got out, I was speaking not only to senators and to assembly people within the first month of me being out in Sacramento, but I also flew to Baltimore, Maryland, and spoke on a panel with the communications department for my alma mater, Cal State LA, with all colleges around. And it's very important that our educational system also starts to embracing the differences that people are experiencing throughout their communities and teaching that in the curriculum that they actually provide, because that is going to set the stage, and it needs a holistic approach to actually share the narratives from the kids and what they're going through now, and the parents and what they're going through in their communities with the kids, and then the folks that are incarcerated, and then post incarceration too. And so, okay, I'm off my soapbox.
No, it was all good information. I am going to fill in a couple blanks. Our incarcerated members get to participate in this storytelling to legislators by writing letters of support that several members of our team coordinate, and it's a massive effort. We have 40,000 incarcerated members, and they come out strong for things. So we get lots and lots of mail that's opened by other parts of our team, and Lee helps facilitate all of that through his organizers as well. And that's a really empowering thing. I don't know how many people on this call are incarcerated, are formerly incarcerated themselves, or know someone who is, but when I was in county jail, all our newspapers came blacked out. Any legal information was cut out entirely. I was only allowed 6 books at a time in prison, and many of them were not allowed, especially anything regarding the system. So the education that we get inside through all possible means, including just family members, you know, because they can't necessarily control what we talk about in that visiting room. So we let people know what's going on. We let people, you know, Lee's phone gets, you know, starts ringing, and he lets people know what's going on, and making sure that we're informed is a huge part of what Lee was talking about with education in general, because as I mentioned earlier, incarceration literacy is very low in this country, and that's something that we can fix in pretty much any platform. You know, no matter what industry you're in, it could benefit from understanding how formerly incarcerated people are part of this world. Currently incarcerated people are part of this world. Our families are part of this world, and giving us a space to really exist in the fullness of our stories only benefits everybody else. So we actually, I know Lee was worried about time, but we're actually making good time. And I wanted to know from any of y'all three. Of course, if you're in here and you have some questions for us, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We got the bare bones of what we wanted to tell you out, so I'm feeling all right about this. But if there's any other aspects of storytelling in our job that y'all wanted to talk about, your personal experiences, feel free.
I wanted to add something that Lee also had brought up really quick, is that in the meetings that I was able to be fortunate to be part of with our members, it was the folks who were formerly incarcerated who were able to be in the room, who really, I think, were the strongest of all in terms of storytelling, because they had actually experienced being incarcerated and what it felt like to be, you know, on reentry, like if they were on parole or on probation, all of the hardships that they had experienced. I think out of all of the storytellers in the room, it was them who really were able to really come through the most compelling in sharing their lived experience. And it was very powerful to hear from folks who were formerly incarcerated in those spaces. So just really wanted to uplift that there is so much power in being vulnerable. And so we were sometimes fortunate where loved ones were able to have their incarcerated loved ones call in during the meetings and be able to put them on speakerphone in those meetings, and have that incarcerated person talk about what it was like when in their current situation. So just the many ways that we can still bring them into this experience. And sometimes it meant having their loved one read a letter that they prepared in advance for that meeting, because they knew they couldn't be in that meeting with us, but they still wanted their voice to be heard. But just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Daisy. And Lee mentioned something else too, and he mentioned so many great points, but I wanted to touch on another one that he mentioned was really, and Raw as well, which was really shifting the culture for our loved ones when they come home, and how they use this fear-mongering tactic to scare citizens and community members, or to influence them to be afraid of formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated people. Well, what we also know is that the media, right, is a tool that is strategically used to illustrate current issues. And they use the media to illustrate our stories, to illustrate who our loved ones are. And so that's one of the additional powers of storytelling, is that we get to reclaim our stories and tell our truth for what they truly are, as opposed to allowing those media guided narratives to paint a picture for everyone else as to who we are, who my brother is, who Daisy's loved one is, who Lee is, who Ra is, because they're going based upon a charge on a paper. They're going based upon a crime that has been committed or some harm that has been caused, but not looking at our loved ones as full, whole humans, as individuals with the same complexities and physiological and psychological impacts that we all experience as well here on the outside. And so historically, you know, people in prison and our loved ones have been depicted so egregiously, so negatively. And so as we begin to take back as we begin to find our power and really fulfill our power, because it's in us, we just have to discover it and learn how to utilize it. And so through our stories, that is how we do that. And I just find it extremely compelling and extremely essential as to how powerful stories are. And so I just kind of wanted to touch on that. Like, yes, there is a method of painting a picture for us, whereas instead, by telling our story, we begin to unveil who we truly are for our communities.
I love that. Thank you, Antoinette. It looks like we have 10 minutes left. Ruben, it looks like you have a question. Do you want to unmute or drop it in the chat? Up to you.
So hello, everyone. My name is Ruben Radillo. I was formerly incarcerated. You know, I did 25 years. I've been out about a year and a half now. I did a total of 32 years. And, you know, first and foremost, I want to thank all you guys for your hard work. I was one of the ones that was receiving your letters and trying to advocate and, for change. A lot of people, it's hard to get them engaged. Sometimes, the language, the term that the law uses is very intimidating to a lot of people in there. So it's very hard to recruit. But the people, they have that that drive to make a change. They just don't know how. And everything that you guys said, man, it was so powerful. It's powerful because you guys are getting everything from the root. That's where that's where we're gonna make that change too, because everything else is although we do make a change, sometimes it's not a permanent change. So everything I heard today is wow, man. I like to stay in contact with you guys and see how I could put my 2 cents in it. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much. Thank you guys for the hard work you guys did. I still had like 15 to 30 years to do, but because of the youth offender law that came into effect, I was able to be given another chance and come out here. So I'm forever grateful. I know you guys were behind so many changes. I'm not sure if you guys were directly with that one, but I mean, it's all the same, you know, all the same fight. So I always said to myself, man, you know what? I want to meet these individuals. When I came out, I was telling one of my homegirls, he goes, oh yeah, initiate justice. Oh yeah, you should meet them there about that. So I said, well, one of these days I'm going to meet them and I'm going to thank them personally. So here I am. Thank you so from the bottom of my heart for your battles, the fight, and everything that and the humanity that you guys have inside to care for us inside. You know, that makes a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to kind of paraphrase our executive director and founder, Taina, when whenever anyone praises us, she just mirrors that back, because this organization only exists because you are reading those letters on the inside, you know, and you did come home with that change in your heart. And I'm reading the comments, it looks like you're an artist, you're out here making real cultural change. That's as significant as the podcast, that's as significant as our work. And we want to uplift you too. Thank you for your kindnesses, and also thank you for coming home, you know. I forgot I was a facilitator for a second, so I remuted myself to pass it on. I'm going to pass it to Lee for the last few minutes because he always has something good to say. No pressure.
No pressure. No, just it's so. I just hearing Ruben speak, and you know, it just re-energizes us and like what we're doing, and making sure that we're continuously trying to amplify the voices of the folks inside and their family members and loved ones, and even like the community that they've come from that want them to return home. And there's many ways that we can use art to do that, whether it is in poetry and prose and spoken word, or art visually, or you know, the having them audio and using their voices and having them speak for themselves. And so every chance that we get is we want to be able to amplify the voices of the people that are directly impacted by incarceration, because like I said before, you know, people that are, you know, closest to the problem or the issues are also closest to the solutions. And so they should have a seat at the table, and they should be the ones that are talking about the change and how they're going to not only implement more change, but how they've changed, to give real life examples behind the statistics that often get, you know, marred, or they get like overused in saying this or that, and there's like a battle of numbers. But behind these numbers, there's real people like Ruben. You know, 40,000 people we currently have on our quarterly mailing list that get our leaflets and get our pamphlets, that are demystifying this language that is used just to further isolate folks from the truth. And to Ruben's point, you know, when I was inside, and I would get the IJ leaflet or the pamphlet, and you know, we would pass them around. We would have names written down the side of the paper, and when you finished reading it, you would pass it on to the next person on that their name that was on that was on the side. And so we would get it and we would devour it and we would talk about it, and this would be our conversation. It wasn't about crimes that we wanted to commit. It wasn't about harm that we had kind of put on other people, but it was about the things of taking like responsibility and accountability for our lives, and wanting a better future for ourselves and for the folks that were around us. And so it's super important to continue to get folks like Ruben, and to get people that are impacted by the system to share their stories. And it's not just the folks that are incarcerated, it's their family members, their loved ones, their kids, their moms, their brothers, their sisters, their, you know, their neighbors. Like, it's really important for folks to start to share more and more about what they envision as a safe and healthy community, instead of somebody that has never been to their community making those decisions for them. And so it's one of the reasons why I was so happy and you know, willing to go ahead and become a part of Abolition is for Everybody, the podcast, because these conversations and these narratives, they need to be continuously amplified and talked about, and demystified. So folks that are not as aware or not as savvy as what's going on in the community that has been like removed from us, the ones that are under the watchful eyes of the gun towers or behind the electric fences and encased in these concrete sarcophaguses, like we need to be able to hear them. And we need to be able to hear the people that love them and that care for them and that want them to return home and be an asset to their family dynamic and to be an asset to their community. And so I just appreciate like Raw and everybody that has given us the opportunity to be here today and to talk to you. And Ruben, you know, I gave you my email address, lee@initiatejustice.org. Like, please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that I can do to assist you or that you want to assist your community. I would love to be able to connect you to some of those resources that I have. And I would love for you to be a part of IJ and amplifying your voice out here. So I just really appreciate the integrity that you've shown with your testimony and the vulnerability, but the courage that it took to be able to, you know, turn that camera on and talk about your life. So yeah, I just really appreciate this opportunity and being here. So Ra, please.
Just gonna go ahead and say thank you to everybody. We love Justice Arts Coalition and we absolutely love this convening. We were very excited to see every one of the panels. I hope you check them all out. And please connect with IJ. You're welcome at our healing circles. You don't have to live in the state to participate. You're welcome at our Abolition Corner where we talk about what abolition is. You don't have to live in this state. If you do live here and you want to help us make some real significant legislative differences, we have a policy corner, we have our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter that keeps you up to date. And we will hold your hands through the whole process. We know it's new and scary and different, but we are here to show you how people did it. So thank you guys so much for attending. We appreciate you all.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. If you learned something new today, or if the session inspired you in any way, challenged you or taught you, something that you already knew, didn't know, please feel free to share your support for the convening by making a donation at the link that I just put in the chat. And as well, if you would like to stay connected to JAC and its network of teaching artists, activists, and others doing inspiring work, you can also hit our link tree app. Also in the link, sorry, also in the chat right now. And finally, don't forget to check out the open space schedule that I will also drop in right now that has some other quick sessions that you can go to. And also thank you once again, interpreter Trisha, for doing all of this.